I'm Denise.
She's a non-fiction editor. And I'm Louise.
She's a fiction editor. And together,
we're the Editing Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Editing Podcast. This week, we're thrilled to welcome back Louise Bolotin, who shared so many valuable insights with us about sub-editing.
Yeah, great to have you back, Louise. So this time around, we're dealing with a very different topic, the language of illness.
Yeah, hello again, Louise.
Hello, thanks for having me back.
You're welcome.
So, conscious language, it's rightly an important topic that any professional editor needs to be aware of and thinking about. So, problematic racialised, ageist, transphobic, gendered and disability language, for example, all of those are increasingly being considered and challenged, but the language of illness hasn't had quite the same level of attention, and that's an issue that's very close to your heart, Louise. Would you like to explain to the listeners why that is?
Yes, about 3.5 months ago, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. That was a bit of a shock because I hadn't had any cancer symptoms while the tumours were growing inside me, and I felt well, and then suddenly I discovered that actually I wasn't well, and I was immediately thrust into a whole world, not just about oncology appointments and scans and stuff, but the ridiculous amount of cliched language around cancer that doesn't really apply to any other kind of illnesses. And I don't find a lot of the language around cancer to be helpful. It's very stereotypical, and I think a lot of it is just thoughtless. I have a real bugbear about one or two particular terms.
Go on, give us some examples.
Well, the word journey, for example, which, even now, if you go and look it up in a dictionary, whether a print one or online, will give you a very, very clear definition. This is about when you travel from A to B in a car or on a bus or a train or a plane or whatever. I mean, for me, that's what a journey is. I can walk out of my house, I can get on a train in central Manchester, and I can be in London 2 hours later. That was a journey for me. For me, cancer is not a journey, and yet it's always talked about in these terms. And I think, I can't prove this, but I have a theory that this goes back to all these reality TV shows like X Factor, which I think was probably the one that started it, where everyone has a backstory, and then it's their journey as they start on the program and do their auditions, and hopefully, they
become a superstar.
But it's that whole process of like going through auditions and on TV and going through all the different stages of a musical talent contest. It's a journey. I mean, I don't understand why that in itself is even called a journey. I would say that kind of thing is an experience for sure, but suddenly it's become the language of cancer, and I am facing death within the next 4 to 6 months for sure. And I have people saying to me, good luck with your cancer journey. And I'm like, do you even understand what you just said to me? It's really quite shocking, and it
how
makes
does it make you feel, Louis? Well, you've just said it makes you feel angry, but what kind of language do you think how do you want people to speak to you about this? What do you want them to how do you want them to frame it, or do you want them to ask you?
I think asking anybody with any kind of medical condition is a good place to start, in the same way that we might around language, that's problematic racialized language or ageist and so on, as Denise just said. Quite often it's better to ask somebody how they would like to be described or whatever. I mean, I have a disability as well. I have epilepsy, and it's been a bugbear of mine for the last 30 years that people say I'm suffering from it, and I'm not suffering from epilepsy. I have it, I live with it. I haven't had a big fit for a long time because I take medication. I definitely don't think I'm suffering from it. It's part of my life, but it's not the only part. And I get really cross when people call me an epileptic as well. So these are all,
like it's defining you in some way.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of discussion around disability language about, whether it's the social model or the medical model, which kind of determines how people with disabilities get described. When I was working on in the press as a sub-editor, Most style guides these days will say things like wheelchair user, not wheelchair bound, because obviously someone who's in a wheelchair uses it to get around. That's their pair of legs, basically, except it's wheels. When you describe somebody as wheelchair bound, you're basically saying you're limited, you're defined by your restrictions because you can't walk. So there's a lot of discourse around disability language for things like that. But in terms of like actual illnesses, I know somebody whose father died of motor neurone disease a couple of years ago, and motor neurone disease isn't talked about as like a battle or a fight. It's definitely not a journey. Motor neurone disease always ends in death, or it's a progressive degenerative disease. I think if anybody said to somebody who has motor neurone disease, well, good luck on your MND journey, you probably want to punch them in the face, because you've been saying, well, good luck with dying. It's a terribly offensive thing to say, and there's a lot of discussion around, it's a battle, it's a fight, this is a battle you have to overcome. And of course, a lot of people who have cancer don't survive it. It kills them. And I make no apologies for saying kills, because it does. It's a terrible disease to have. But my friend Emma, her mother had breast cancer, and she did overcome it. She did survive it. She had surgery, she had chemo. And when she was going back for one of her follow-up appointments, one of the nurses in the cancer clinic said to her, I'm sure it was your positive attitude that helped you to beat your cancer. And Emma's mother just replied, well, that's not very nice. What about all the women who didn't make it?
So true.
That language around battles and fighting, it also kind of makes it feel like it's an individual responsibility. It's your fault if you die of cancer because you didn't fight hard enough. And this kind of language is replicated across medical brochures and stuff. When I was diagnosed, I was given a whole bunch of Macmillan booklets and things about bowel cancer and secondary tumours and stuff. And these booklets, they've got the reading level of a 7-year-old for one thing, which is, I won't go into how annoying that is. But it's full of the language around your cancer journey and battling it and fighting it and surviving it. And even while we've been talking just now, I find some of those words trying to come off my tongue because they're so ingrained in the language.
They are ingrained, aren't they?
They are completely ingrained. We don't even. So one of my friends has got he's got a friend who works in a teaching hospital in Nottingham, and this friend had heard that I'd written about my experiences on Facebook, because when I was diagnosed, I basically posted to tell my friends I'd just been diagnosed with cancer. And he said, oh, I'd really like to read your blog. And I said, well, it isn't a blog, it's a bunch of Facebook posts. And this was someone who works with patients in a cancer clinic at a teaching hospital in Nottingham. And so I said, well, I haven't really got anything to show you, it's just my private Facebook post. And then he said, well, I wish you well on your cancer journey. And I said, well, it's not a journey. And then he said, oh, well, we have to use this in my work. We have to, the department head said we have to use the term cancer journey. And I said to him, I'm not even one of your patients, so why are you using it with me? You're not obliged to use it with me. But it's become so ingrained that all the professionals who work in and around medical cancer settings, various clinics and things like that, they all use this term, and I just find it,
which means
so
we're all
annoying.
using it.
Yeah,
we're all using it now, aren't we? Because we don't know how else to talk about it. We assume that if that's the way Macmillan are talking about it, or that's the way the NHS is talking about it, then that's the right way to talk about it. And so,
has anybody actually asked people with cancer how they feel about it?
It was really refreshing to see you on Facebook.
I think we've gone from a society where nobody ever talked about cancer ever, because it was the big taboo, to talking about it very openly, but within a really tight kind of narrative. Of using these particular terms, and it is very, very problematic if you've got terminal cancer, or if you've got multiple cancers or whatever, and you're clearly going to have, if you are going to try and cure it, you're going to be going through a lot of really quite traumatic medical experiences to do that, like chemotherapy or surgery or whatever. But we talk about, you know, it's kind of like this kind of bright, smiley, flowery language, and I don't think it's appropriate at all. Actually, it's become a terrible cliche. It's a hideous stereotype, and it really doesn't describe a lot of people's experience. And I announced on LinkedIn a week ago that I was retiring, and I said it's because I have terminal cancer, and I had a lot of very lovely responses, but again I had people saying good luck with your cancer journey, and I was like, it's not a journey is when you get on a bus and you get off at the other end. Well, I think cancer is a journey, even if it restricts your mobility. And I'm like, well, fine, if you have cancer and you want to call your cancer a journey, go ahead, but this is my cancer and it's not a journey for me, and I don't want anybody saying that to me.
How do you talk about it, Louise? How do you talk about your cancer?
I have been very frank from the very beginning, because I think that even when people have terminal cancer, people don't want to talk about what's coming. We have taboos around talking about death in this country, and end of life. I know what's coming, and at the moment I'm writing quite a lot about on Facebook about preparing the big end of life questions with my GP and so on. And I've had really nice feedback about how frank I've been. But at the beginning, when I told my friends I have terminal cancer, a lot of people said, I don't really know what to say. And I said, well, that's all right. Just say that you don't know what to say, and then just keep chatting with me. We don't have to talk about my cancer. What's worse is when people don't know what to say, so they kind of stay away. And you suddenly think, well, have I lost a friend? They're not saying anything to me.
I think that's quite a common thing, isn't it? With people, they don't know what to say, so they withdraw because they're worried about upsetting or offending you, or they don't know how to deal with their own thoughts and feelings around it as well.
And that's when sometimes the alternative is to lean on that language, those narratives of battle, fights, journeys, because it feels like a safety net. It's almost it's a way of getting in there, rather than just saying to someone like in your position, how do you want us to deal with this?
I think if we look at, we could compare it to, to the examples of the racialized language that was very commonplace in the UK, slur words beginning with N and things like that, which nobody batted an eyelid about 40, 50, 60 years ago. But of course, our thinking around those problematic terms, that kind of problematic language, has moved on enormously, not least of all guided by the minorities who have experienced racism. And I think cancer's kind of trapped in this little corner at the moment where we have a very small vocabulary for it. But I would like to think that after I am gone, probably not immediately, but at some time down the line, there will be better thinking about this in terms of how we describe this particular illness, which is not just one illness. There are many kinds of cancers, and many kinds of outcomes from them. Some cancers can be fixed quite easily with a little bit of quick and dirty surgery, for example. Other people need chemo, they might need radiotherapy, they might have many, many cycles of treatment over many years. Some people might be done and dusted in 6 months. It's a really different experience for everybody. And I think, the talk about battles and fights and journeys and so on just it's not adequate to describe it. And this is the only illness where we talk about it in these kind of terms. We don't talk about other illnesses being a battle.
When we think about gendered language, like there's a move now to, rather than assigning pronouns to people, to think instead, let's ask people what their pronouns are. And what you've talked about earlier is a very similar thing. Like, why can't we move to a situation where we ask people, right, you've got cancer, how do you want to frame it? How do you want us to, when we're talking about it? And so if we can do that with gendered language, we can do it with the language of illness as well. But it does need a kick up the backside.
It does.
Which Louise, let's face it, it's what you're doing right now, is because you're being so open and frank about your cancer and about how you feel about the language around it, that I hope that people listening to this will start to think more consciously about the language that is used, and perhaps challenge themselves and their assumptions and maybe gently challenge other people. It's only by having these conversations that we can start to think about how these changes can come about, really. So hopefully you've opened that door for some people that are listening to this.
I'm just one person swimming against a vast global tide of
it's how everything
cancer
it's how everything starts, though, isn't it? It's
but that is how it starts. Yes. And I think it's quite likely that in 10 years time or something, we might well be looking at how we move away from these kind of stereotypes when we talk about cancer. I would really like to think so, and I would really like to think I am actually challenging my own friends, and certainly one or two of my friends have said really appreciated you being frank about preparing for end of life, for example, because we all die, and we don't like talking about death. And I hope that I'm giving. One of my friends posted on Facebook this morning and said, it's actually made me think about my own retirement, and now I'm going to bring it forward. And he really appreciated that what I was posting on Facebook was making him think about, this is someone who's a few years older than me and doesn't have cancer, but it made him think about, the inevitable comes at some point, whether it's illness or you die from natural causes or whatever. But he said it had really made him think about, his future. He doesn't know how many years of retirement he's got or anything, but I think it has made quite a few of my friends think about, what happens when you get sick and you might die from it. And not to put your head in the sand. For me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't have done this differently because I'm just mouthy anyway. And I've always been quite open and blunt. And I have actually told people to F off with the cancer stuff. I had somebody sent me a press release. Another journalist sent me a press release, and I emailed back, and it was a press release for something that has nothing to do with any of the subjects I've ever covered in journalism. And I was having a bit of a bad day, so I sent him back a rather tart reply saying, one, I've retired. No, that was the last one I said. One, I don't cover this subject. Two, I've never covered this subject. Three, your press release was really badly targeted. Please make sure you send it to journalists in future who actually do write about this topic. And four, I've retired. And I got a response back that said, oh, you're so rude, etc., etc. And I just replied and said, oh, do fuck off. I've retired because I've got terminal cancer. And then he actually emailed me back and said, what a foul-mouthed response from someone who's an advanced professional member of the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading. And I didn't reply, but I was just thinking,
I don't know what to say to that. I just that's a bit ew.
I mean, I thought it was quite funny that I'd actually managed to offend him because he didn't like the fact that a lot of people who, a lot of public relations agencies pump out press releases that are badly targeted, and if I'm in the mood, I will take them to task over it. So yes, I think that's the one thing about having terminal cancer, because it does give you carte blanche to tell people to fuck off.
Oh, Louise, hang on a minute. I think you'd have done that 10 years ago.
I do it anyway. I've done it my whole life. But yes, it certainly does give you carte blanche to be as rude as you want to people. Yeah. And I just, my clock is ticking down. I don't have much time left. I don't know how much time I've got left, and I don't want to waste it having stupid conversations with people about my cancer. Oh, you're on a journey. No, I'm not. I'm dying. That's the blunt truth of it. It's not a journey. I'm dying. And I don't think we should be talking about cancer as a journey. But the NHS leaflets and, cancer charities leaflets all talk about it. And I think let's come back to the whole issue of editing. I think this is an area where editors could actually start to push the envelope and say why, sending stuff back, to the authors and saying, don't you think this is a bit of a cliche? Is there a better way we could frame this? I think there's definitely a role there for editors who work with medical texts to push the boundaries a bit. And maybe even if you're working with indie authors who are writing fiction, again, you see those kind of things cropping up in stories where you've got a storyline about, one of the characters who's got cancer. You'll see it popping up in fiction as well. I think there is an onus on there actually to start challenging this.
And to remind people at the very least that yes, some people may view their own cancer, just as you said earlier. I'm just paraphrasing. You said some people may see it as a journey, but we cannot assume that everybody wants to see it like that. And when you're writing for a general audience, you need to be aware that your words might harm somebody or offend them. That's exactly what you've been doing, reminding people that, as editors, as people, we can't make these assumptions. Yeah,
it's like this idea almost that, people with cancer, I'm doing air quotes here, people with cancer are some kind of amorphous mass who all think, feel and react in the same way. And not everybody wants to see it as a battle. Not everybody wants to engage with treatment, and not everybody wants to spend their time remaining going out and doing lots of really brilliant things. Some people might just want to retreat to their room and not see you do.
I mean, I have chosen not to have treatment. Even when I was first diagnosed, and I didn't know until 12 days after my diagnosis that it was terminal. I had already for many years thought if I ever get cancer, I'm not sure I would want to have chemotherapy. So when I had my first appointment with the oncologist, I said, I'm kind of not really keen on going down that road. And given that my cancer is very advanced, I was offered chemo and decided not to, because it wouldn't really, there was a strong chance that the particular drugs they wanted to give me wouldn't really have helped anyway. And I could have had 3 months of chemo and got to the end of that cycle and been told, well, we've just looked at your scans and sorry, but it didn't help. And it only delays the inevitable. So I chose not to have treatment and just try and live a great life while I'm still well enough to do so. It's people have said to me, it is a battle. It's not, because I'm in a situation where my cancer is a battle I will never be able to win, so I don't see it as a battle. People die of all kinds of things anyway, not just cancer. So I haven't been offended when people have said journey to me, but I have got angry. I have challenged them. I've made my own choices about how I'm dealing with this disease and how I'm going to face it. But I just don't want people throwing cliches at me, because I think that's offensive. Absolutely.
It's such a good reminder for our friends and colleagues who are editorial professionals and who are listening to this today to think more granularly about people with cancer and their experiences and the language around that, because we have a duty, really, once we know about these things and once people flag them up to us, we've got a duty as editors to carry that forward into our work, I think, and make people think about the language that they're using. That's our job. That's what we do.
We're asking people to, it's about interrogating the words we use, isn't it? Not about saying this is wrong or this is right, about interrogating all the different circumstances in which something might work or might not work. And I think that's what you've really done a fantastic job with, using your very, very visible public platforms as well online to do in a typically Bolotin way, just like just say it like it is and challenge what's gone before.
I mean, for me, that was just instinctive. I mean, I broke the news to friends first, and a lot of that was me breaking it on Facebook, because I've got friends scattered over a wide geographical area. And then I posted on the forum for the Chartered Institute of Editing and Proofreading and let people know I was retiring because I have terminal cancer. And then, as I said last week, I went on LinkedIn and made an announcement, and I was actually shocked at how viral it went. And then I thought, do you know what? The number of times I posted on LinkedIn and said, I've just blogged about something, hop over to my website and read my latest blog post, and I would feel lucky if I got 50 views. I've had over 100,000 now, and I just was thinking, you bastards, you weren't interested in me until I was dying, and I told you. But
but doesn't that show you how it resonated with people?
Yeah,
how you put it across, the topic and how you put it across. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I couldn't do it any other way. This is me. I've always spoken very frankly about all kinds of stuff. And I don't know if that's partly because I worked in the press for such a long time, where we do kind of tend to say it as it is. But this is just me, and I'm not the kind of person who goes, "Oh, I've got cancer, I can't talk about it." And I hope that I am showing people a different way. I actually do hope that I do.
Well, and the fact that those posts are getting so much visibility. It means that you have created even within the framework of those single posts on Facebook and on LinkedIn, you've created these little micro platforms where you can absolutely start that ball rolling of challenging the assumptions around language and language around illness, and that is part of a much bigger conversation that as we've all agreed, editors, it's our duty of care to do that. And so and we can't exclude illness from it now there, because it's out there. You've made sure of that.
Yeah. Louise, we really need to thank you so much for your openness, your wisdom, your Bolotinness. We really both like to wish you much wine, much gin consumption, and much fun over the months ahead.
Thank you.
Plenty of relaxation and hurrahs if and when you want them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Louise. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. You can rate, review and subscribe to us via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever platform you prefer. So she's been Louise.
And they've been Louise and Denise. Thank you for listening, and join us again soon.
Bye.
Bye.